She lied about her affair with my business partner, then stole $250, $0 from our joint account to buy a house with him. Now she's suing me for half the property I worked a decade to build. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife, Lisa, betrayed me in the most brutal way imaginable. Honestly, it feels like I woke up in some twisted soap opera where the plot twist is that my wife, who I trusted with everything, was cheating on me with my own business partner, Mark. And if that wasn't enough, she stole $250,000 from our joint account to buy a house with him. Yeah, you read that right. She took $250, $0 just like that, and now she's actually suing me for half the property I spent 10 years building from scratch. Let me back up a little. Lisa and I met in college, fell hard, got married after a few years of dating, and built a life. I was never wealthy, but I worked my ass off running my own small business, an auto repair shop that I poured every ounce of myself into. We had a decent life, nothing fancy but stable, and I thought we had something real. At first, Lisa was supportive, even proud of what I was doing. She'd brag about how lucky she was to have someone like me. She was bitchy, sure, always had a sharp tongue, quick to dismiss people she didn't like, but I loved her attitude. She was fierce, confident, and I thought that was what made her special. But over the last year, things started to change. She became more irritable, snapping at me over small things, and there were little signs I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore anymore. She'd stay out late, make excuses, and her phone became her new best friend, always locked, always with a password I didn't know. The first real red flag was about 6 months ago. I noticed her spending a lot more money than usual, designer clothes, fancy dinners, trips she never mentioned. I questioned her about it and she brushed it off, saying she was just treating herself or that she'd gotten a bonus at work. But then I started noticing receipts in her purse, small things like jewelry stores, hotels, even a couple of receipts from a house furniture store. I'd ask her about it and she'd roll her eyes, call me paranoid, accuse me of not trusting her. That stung, especially since I'd always been open with her about my business and my finances. One night I decided to dig a little. I had access to our joint bank account, as most couples do, and I noticed a strange withdrawal, $250, just gone. I thought maybe it was a mistake or a transfer I didn't understand, so I pulled up the statement the next morning. That's when I saw what she'd done. She drained our savings, the entire amount, and used it to buy a house with Mark. I couldn't believe it. It was like I'd been punched in the stomach. All those years of hard work, gone in an instant. I confronted her that very night. When I showed her the bank statement, her face went pale for a second. Then she started to get defensive. "It's none of your business," she snapped. "You're overreacting. Mark and I are just friends. We're not doing anything wrong." She lied right to my face, claiming the money was for some investment, some future plan she'd been secretly working on. But I knew better. I saw her phone light up with texts from Mark, flirtatious, intimate messages. I saw the way she looked at him when she thought I wasn't paying attention, like she was in love with him, not me. It was like my entire world crumbled in that moment. I felt anger bubble up, but also a deep, aching sadness. How had I missed all the signs? How could she lie so easily? I'd always been honest, straightforward, and she'd been hiding this from me all along. I didn't even know who she was anymore. The woman I married, the woman I loved, was now a stranger. The betrayal hit me hard. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her admit what she was doing. But I just stood there, speechless, staring at her as she tried to justify her actions with more lies. It was clear she didn't care about the damage she'd done. She only cared about getting what she wanted. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything, trying to make sense of it all. The woman I thought I knew was a liar, a thief, and a cheat. And worse, she was trying to manipulate her way out of it, acting as if I was the wrong one. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. But beneath all that, there was this strange sense of emptiness. I'd spent 10 years building my business, my life, and now all of it seemed like it was slipping away. The trust I had in her was shattered, and I knew I couldn't just pretend nothing had happened. I had to decide what to do next. That's when I started thinking about revenge, about how to make her pay for what she'd done. But I wasn't just angry. I was hurt in ways I never thought possible. I needed to figure out how to fight back, how to take control of what was left of my life. Because if she thought she could just steal from me and walk away, she was dead wrong. I was going to make her regret everything, even if I had to do it from the ground up. After that night, things got worse in a hurry. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and I kept replaying everything over and over. Her lies, her sneaking around, the money, the house she bought with Mark. It was like my mind was stuck in a loop of betrayal. I knew I needed to act, but I also knew I had to be smart about it. Lisa was the type who could spin stories, lie her way out of anything, so I had to gather concrete evidence if I wanted to do something about it. The first step was to dig deeper. I started going through her phone when she wasn't looking, something I'd never done before, but I felt like I had no choice. I found texts, photos, even receipts from her secret trips. She'd been seeing Mark at least twice a week, sometimes more. She was brazen about it too, sending him flirty messages, talking about how much she hated pretending around me, how she needed someone who actually cared. That was a punch to the gut. I'd always thought she was a little bitchy, sure, but I never imagined she'd cheat on me with my own business partner. I also found out that she'd been lying about her work. She claimed she was working late at her office, but I caught her in several lies. Turns out, she'd been meeting Mark at a condo downtown more than once. I even hired a private investigator just to confirm what I already knew. The guy followed her for a week, snapping photos of her sneaking into that condo with Mark, of her leaving with her hair messed up, her lipstick smudged. It was all there, undeniable. The worst part was knowing she'd been lying to my face for months, maybe longer. At that point, I was furious. Not just hurt, but furious. I felt like I'd been played for a fool. The woman I loved, the woman I worked so hard to support and build a future with, was out there screwing my business partner, stealing my money, and pretending everything was fine. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. I had trusted her completely, trusted her with my life, my business, my home, and she'd been planning this behind my back the whole time. That's when I decided I had to confront her. I set up a meeting, told her I knew everything and I wanted to hear her explain. I wanted her to look me in the eye and tell me she wasn't cheating, that she wasn't stealing. But she didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she got bitchy, started yelling, calling me paranoid, obsessive, insecure. She said I was overreacting, that she loved me and that Mark was just a friend who helped with some business stuff. Yeah, right. That's when I really lost it. I told her I had proof, photos, receipts, her messages, and that I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Her reaction was classic Lisa. She shrugged, smirked, and told me I was overreacting. Said I was jealous, insecure, that I was ruining everything. She even had the nerve to say she'd never cheat on me, that I was imagining things, that I was crazy. But I knew better. I knew what I saw, what I had proof of. Her lies only made me angrier. I felt like I'd been punched again and again, but I also knew I had to stay calm, keep my head clear. Emotionally, I was a mess. Part of me wanted to break down, to cry, to just give up. But the other part was boiling with rage. I'd spent a decade building my business, working my ass off, and now all of that was being destroyed. I trusted her, loved her, and she'd been sneaking around behind my back, stealing from us. That betrayal cut so deep I wasn't sure I'd ever recover. I felt humiliated, used, and furious, like I'd been punched in the stomach so hard I couldn't breathe. But I also knew I had to do something. I couldn't let her get away with this, not without consequences. That night I sat alone in my office, staring at the pile of evidence I'd collected. I thought about how to make her pay, how to make her regret the day she ever decided to betray me. I realized I couldn't just walk away. I had to hit her where it hurt. Her pride, her plans, her sense of security. I started planning my next move, knowing that whatever I did, it had to be calculated, cold, and precise. Because if I was going to fight back, I needed to be smarter than her, and I needed to ensure she'd never do this again. I didn't sleep that night either. Instead, I spent hours researching what legal options I had, how to get back what she stole, and how to protect myself from her next move. The more I learned, the clearer it became. I was in a war, and I had to fight to save what little I had left. In the days that followed, I felt like I was walking through a fog. My mind was racing constantly, trying to piece everything together, figure out my next move, and keep my emotions in check. The betrayal cut so deep that I was half convinced I'd wake up and realize it was all a nightmare. But every time I looked at the evidence, her texts, the receipts, the photos of her sneaking into that condo with Mark, I knew this was real. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. I decided I needed to get legal advice. I found a lawyer who specialized in family and property law, someone who knew how to handle cases involving infidelity and financial betrayal. Sitting across from her was one of the hardest things I've ever done. She was bitchy, dismissive, and seemed eager to brush everything under the rug, claiming I was overreacting again. But I had everything documented. I handed her the evidence, and she nodded slowly, telling me I had a strong case for a divorce, for reclaiming my property, and for going after the money she stole. The lawyer explained that because the money was taken from a joint account, I had a pretty solid claim. But the tricky part was the house. She'd already bought it with Mark, and she was planning to live there. She was trying to hide her assets, hide her plans. I knew I had to act fast if I wanted to stop her from transferring everything to her name or hiding her assets further. I also learned that I could potentially sue her for fraud, especially since she'd lied about the money being for some investment and then used it to buy a house with Mark. While I was trying to process all this, Lisa kept trying to spin her story. She'd call me paranoid, jealous, insecure, basically accusing me of being the problem. She'd say she loved me, that Mark was just a business partner, that she never cheated. But her words didn't match her actions. Her texts, her trips, her secret condo, there was no denying it anymore. I could see she was trying to gaslight me to make me doubt myself. But I'd seen enough. I knew the truth. I also started to realize just how much I'd been. I'd poured so much of myself into that business, into making a life with her, and now it felt like it was all crumbling. The worst part was how she was trying to manipulate the situation, threatening to sue me for half the property, claiming she was entitled because she'd contributed to the house. She even had the nerve to say she was the one who kept the business afloat when I was busy with work. I knew that was just her way of trying to turn things around, to make herself look like the victim. But I wasn't buying it. I started to plan my next move. I wanted to stop her from transferring the house or hiding her assets. I reached out to my lawyer again, told her I wanted to freeze her accounts and file for an emergency injunction to prevent her from selling or refinancing the house. I also contacted a private investigator again just to keep tabs on her. I needed to know where she was, who she was talking to, and what her next move might be. Meanwhile, I felt a strange mixture of anger, sadness, and a kind of numbness. I wasn't sure if I was more pissed off or heartbroken. Part of me still loved her, even after everything, but I knew I couldn't trust her anymore. The woman I married was gone. What was left was someone I barely recognized. A liar, a thief, a manipulator. I kept asking myself how I had missed all the signs, how I'd been so blind to her true nature. It was a hard pill to swallow. But I also realized I wasn't going to let her destroy me. I had spent 10 years building my business, my life, and I wasn't going to let her take that away from me without a fight. I was going to protect what was mine, even if it meant going to war. I knew that I had to be strategic, patient, and relentless, because if I didn't fight for myself now, I'd lose everything: my money, my house, my future. And I was damn sure I wasn't going to let that happen. So I started gathering more evidence, talking to people who could help, and planning my next steps. I knew the legal battle was coming, and I was ready for it. The betrayal had cut so deep, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not without consequences. I just hoped I was strong enough to see this through, and that someday I'd find a way to rebuild from the wreckage she left behind. The legal process moved faster than I expected, which was both a relief and a nightmare. My lawyer filed for an emergency injunction to freeze her assets and prevent Lisa from selling or transferring the house she bought with Mark. I also started the paperwork for divorce. I knew that even if I wanted to salvage something, trust was shattered beyond repair. The emotional toll was staggering. I felt like I was walking on a razor's edge every day, caught between anger and despair. Lisa didn't take the news well. She lashed out, calling me all kinds of names: jealous, insecure, controlling. She accused me of trying to ruin her, which was laughable considering I'd only just found out what she'd done. Her bitchy attitude only hardened my resolve. I knew I had to stay calm, play it smart, and let the legal process do its job. But inside, I was burning. Every time I looked at her, I saw the woman I loved turning into a manipulative, selfish thief. One of the most shocking moments came when I discovered she'd been lying about her finances. She claimed she had nothing to hide, but I found bank statements showing she'd opened new accounts in her name alone, accounts I didn't know about. She transferred money into those accounts, trying to hide her assets. It was clear she was planning to run, to hide what she'd stolen, and to make sure she'd get her cut of the property. The more I uncovered, the more furious I became. How could she do this? How could she lie so effortlessly? Meanwhile, I kept digging into her phone, her emails, anything that might give me leverage. I wanted to know her next move, and I wanted to prepare for it. I also hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her, just in case she tried to sneak out of town or make a deal behind my back. It was a strange feeling, knowing I was watching her, but I couldn't trust her anymore. Every little thing she did seemed suspicious. The emotional impact was overwhelming. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. I'd spent a decade building my business, my life, and now I was watching it fall apart because of her greed and lies. I'd never been someone who thought about revenge much, but now I knew I had to do something to make her pay. Not just financially, but emotionally. I wanted her to feel the pain she'd inflicted on me. I wanted her to know that she couldn't just steal my money, cheat on me, and then walk away like she was the victim. I started to think about how I could fight back beyond just legal action. I wanted to expose her, show everyone what she'd done. I knew she'd try to spin it her way, paint me as the crazy husband, but I had the evidence. I had everything I needed to turn this around. I wasn't going down without a fight. The hardest part was coming to terms with the fact that my marriage was over. I loved her, or at least I thought I did, but her actions proved otherwise. The woman I married wasn't the woman I was dealing with now. She was manipulative, selfish, and completely untrustworthy. The betrayal had shattered any hope I had of fixing things, and I knew I had to accept that. Sometimes, you have to let go of someone you love if they've become someone else entirely. I kept reminding myself that I had built everything I had through years of hard work. The house, the business, the money, all of it was mine, and I was determined to protect it. I started talking to my accountant and financial advisor, figuring out the best way to safeguard what was left. I also began preparing for the inevitable court battle. I knew Lisa would fight dirty, try to manipulate the system, and do whatever it took to get her way. That's why I had to be ready for everything. Deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The legal fight was going to be long and ugly, but I was prepared to see it through. I wanted to make her pay, not just for the money she stole, but for the trust she shattered. I'd been naive, trusting her blindly, and now I was paying the price. But I also realized something else. I was stronger than I thought. I'd lost a lot, but I still had my business, my home, and the truth on my side. That gave me hope, even in the darkest moments. I looked at the evidence again, feeling a strange sense of clarity. She thought she could get away with it, that she could cheat her way into a new life, but I wasn't going to let her. I was going to fight for what was mine, and I was going to make damn sure she paid for her betrayal. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect, dignity, and reclaiming my life. I knew I had a tough road ahead, but I was ready to face it. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that sometimes the only way to win is to fight dirty back. The court date finally arrived after weeks of prep, and I was a nervous wreck. I had all my evidence organized: bank statements, texts, receipts, the investigators' reports, and I was ready to present everything. Lisa, of course, showed up with her lawyer, looking bitchy and smug, like she thought she had already won. She kept trying to spin her lies, claiming she was innocent, that I was just jealous and paranoid. But I didn't take the bait. I knew the truth and I had the proof. The judge listened carefully as my lawyer laid out the case. We argued that Lisa had committed fraud by draining our joint account, that she had hidden assets, and that her actions justified freezing her accounts and halting the property transfer. I could see her lawyer trying to poke holes, but the evidence was overwhelming. The private investigator's photos of her sneaking into Mark's condo, the bank statements showing the stolen money, her secret bank accounts, all of it painted a clear picture. Lisa's lawyer tried to claim she was innocent, that she was just trying to build a future, that she loved Mark and was entitled to her share of the property. She even had the nerve to say I was trying to control her, that I was jealous of her happiness. I felt rage boiling inside me. Her words were empty, her lies transparent. I knew. She was just trying to manipulate the system, but I was done playing nice. The judge's decision came down quickly. She granted the injunction, froze Lisa's assets, and ordered her to stay away from the house and the business. She also scheduled a full hearing to determine the division of property and the return of the stolen money. I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. For the first time in weeks, I saw a glimmer of hope that I might actually get some justice. But Lisa wasn't done. After the court ruling, she stormed out, screaming and calling me all sorts of names: crazy, controlling, jealous. She threatened to fight me to the bitter end, to ruin me if she had to. Honestly, I didn't care. Her words bounced off me. I was too focused on protecting what was left. I knew she'd try to manipulate her way out of everything, but I had the evidence, and I was ready to fight her in court if I had to. That night, I sat alone in my office, staring at the documents. It was a strange feeling, like I was finally taking control back, even if the battle wasn't over yet. I'd spent years building my business, my life, and I wasn't going to let her take it all away in a matter of months. I realized that I'd been naive, trusting her blindly, but now I was learning to be smarter, tougher. I started to think about what I really wanted moving forward. I didn't want to be with someone who lied, cheated, and stole from me. I wanted my life back, my dignity, and my peace. I knew Lisa would keep fighting, trying to manipulate the system, trying to turn everyone against me. But I also knew I had the truth on my side. The truth always comes out in the end. In the days that followed, I doubled down on my efforts. I worked with my lawyer to prepare for the upcoming hearings. I also reached out to my bank and financial advisors to ensure everything was secure. I was determined not to let her steal or hide anything else. I'd already lost so much trust, but I could still protect my assets and my future. The emotional toll was still heavy, but I was slowly starting to accept that this was the end of my marriage. I loved Lisa, but her actions proved she didn't love me back. She was only out for herself. I had to move on, rebuild, and learn from this nightmare. I'd been betrayed and humiliated, but I refused to let her destroy everything I'd spent years creating. I was ready for whatever came next, whether it was a long legal battle or just the painful process of walking away. I knew one thing for sure: I was done being the victim. From now on, I was going to be the one in control. The months that followed were the hardest I've ever endured, but also the most eye-opening. Going through the legal battles, the accusations, and the emotional upheaval, I realized how much I'd been blind. Lisa's betrayal wasn't just about the money or the house. It was about the person I thought I knew, the woman I loved. Looking back, I saw all the signs I'd ignored: her sharp tongue, her secretive behavior, her constant need to spend and lie. I'd been so eager to see the best in her that I missed the warning signs until it was almost too late. The court proceedings finally wrapped up. The judge awarded me full control of the business and the house, ruling that Lisa had committed fraud when she stole the $250, $0, and lied about her intentions. She was ordered to pay back what she'd taken, and the property was returned to me. Watching her face when the verdict was read was a strange mix of anger and defeat. She had fought hard, tried to manipulate the system, but in the end, the truth and evidence had won out. I felt a strange sense of relief, like a weight had lifted, even though the pain of betrayal still lingered. In the aftermath, I focused on rebuilding. I sold the house she'd bought with Mark, and with the money I recovered, I invested in my business and my future. It was hard to trust anyone after all this, but I learned to be more cautious. I also sought therapy, not just for the legal stress, but to deal with the emotional scars. I had loved Lisa, believed in us, and losing that was like losing a part of myself. But I also realized that I deserved better. I deserved someone who wouldn't lie, steal, or betray me. Looking back, I see this experience as a brutal lesson. Trust is fragile and betrayal can come from the people you least expect. But I also see it as a turning point. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought, that I can survive even the worst kind of heartbreak and treachery. I learned to be smarter about who I trust and how important it is to protect what I've worked so hard for. Now, I'm focused on moving forward. I've started dating again cautiously, and I'm more aware of red flags. I know I'll never completely forget what happened, but I refuse to let it define me. I've come out of this battered but wiser, more resilient. I still have my business, my home, and most importantly, a renewed sense of self-worth. To anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, trust your instincts, protect your assets, and don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. People can surprise you in good ways and bad. But in the end, you have to be your own biggest advocate. I learned the hard way that betrayal cuts deep, but it also teaches you how to be stronger. And no matter how dark things get, there's always a way to rebuild, to heal, and to find happiness again.